Hi, it's Tom from bkmnutrition.com, and today I want to talk about 4 excellent books that you can read during the lockdown period which will help you with your mental health, mental focus, and maybe give you a bit more insight into nutrition and why you behave certain ways with foods. Now, these 4 books are favorites of mine. I generally tend to listen to books on Audible rather than reading them because I do spend a lot of time with my headphones in and walking, and I do find that listening to books on Audible is very beneficial. But I've started now reading books again because I have a bit more time on my hands during lockdown, and so I thought I would recommend 4 books which you might find beneficial. They've certainly helped me, and they inspired me when I wrote my book, or partially inspired me I should say, to write my book. And some of the techniques I use with clients are based around techniques that are covered in these books. Now, these are all things to do with mental prep and habit forming and nutrition, so I'll go over each one and give you a brief overview. These are all available on Audible except for one, or you can just buy them on Amazon. So the first book is The Hungry Brain by Stephan Guyenet. Now, I had the honour of attending a lecture with Stephan Guyenet, and I do believe he even signed my book for me. He's a very intelligent guy, very up on his nutrition and knowledge about why the brain works certain ways. And The Hungry Brain, he talks about why we behave certain ways towards food. So there's something called the optimal foraging theory, which is why we seek out high calorie foods rather than low calorie foods, why we might break our diets to go looking for high calorie foods. And it's a very good insight into our ancestral history and our brain history and why we respond certain ways towards certain foods. So he talks about dopamine response and why we need dopamine, why it's not something we need to be afraid of. Sometimes you might have heard people talk about, we don't want dopamine hits, and sugar is addictive as cocaine because of the dopamine hits you get from certain foods. But actually, the dopamine is what drives us to be able to get our motivation. So we need dopamine in our lives. It's just managing it, which is the issue, and why people break their diets is normally due to dopamine. So and then the stimulus you get from looking at foods and think, I want that food. So The Hungry Brain by Stephan Guyenet, a very nice, good read. It's not too bad if you're not scientifically minded. You can pick up the techniques and the theories quite easily, but I would definitely recommend that if you are having problems with understanding why you always break your diet and why you seek out all these sweet foods. It will give you an idea, an understanding of what you're doing. Now, part of my coaching strategy when I talk to clients and I work with clients is making sure they understand why they behave certain ways, why their diets have failed in the past. Part of that is the education of it. It's not just good enough to say, here's a calorie deficit, stick to it. You have to understand why these things happen, why they come up, and then you can prepare to combat all these triggers that happen. So that's one book I would highly recommend. The next book is another nutrition book, and it's called Mindless Eating by Brian Wansink. Now, I would just preface this with a little caveat that some of the studies that Brian Wansink did have been shown that he tampered with the data a little bit at the end to make it a little bit more sensational. So I can't claim that he's a 100% evidence-based guy, but you can't get away from the amount of research he did and the amount of looking at behavioral instincts and behavioral changes in response to food is very, very interesting. One of my most successful coaching techniques that I use with clients comes from the book Mindless Eating by Brian Wansink, and it's called break cues. And break cues, you might have heard me talk about in other videos, is where, because people, what they do when they snack, they just tend to sit there with a packet of crisps or a pack of celebrations or whatever else, just sit with the whole packet, just eating away, mindlessly eating away. And break cues is a great way of breaking the monotony. So what you do is, you, instead of having the big packet, you put it into a small bowl. So you measure out a portion for yourself to eat, and then when you get to the bottom of that bowl, you've got to look at it, and you've got to make a sensible decision if you're going to go and get more food or not. By the time you've got to the bottom, you've normally satisfied the craving that you get, which is dopamine inspired. Again, that's in the book Stephan Guyenet talks about dopamine, and the break cues break that monotony of eating, which you keep going and going and going. So that's a really good read. There's some really interesting stuff that he did do, aside from the fact that he fiddled his data a little bit. The stuff he talks about is really, really interesting, and it does get you thinking, oh yeah, I do that, you know, and immediately it's like that light bulb moment of, I do that, right, I can change my life to help with that. So it's a really good read. Definitely recommend that, but like I said, with a caveat, some of the data was manipulated a little bit to make it sound a bit more sensational. But a very good read, very informative, and it does open your eyes to why you behave certain ways with food, and hopefully help you to change that. The next book is a real classic. It's called the Chimp Paradox by Professor Stephen Peters. A really good book, and the in my book, where I talk about the three brains, the Muncher brain, the Tevor brain, and the robot brain. That talk is based on a lot of the stuff that is in the Chimp Paradox book, and but in the Chimp Paradox, Professor Stephen Peters talks about having the chimp brain, the human brain, and the computer brain, but he talks about it in a very overall capacity, whereas in my book I talk more based directly on nutrition stimulants. But in that book he talks about having an instinctual brain that commands us and reacts to certain things in our environment, and certainly when the book was recommended to me and I read it, it gave me a completely different view of how I behave and why my clients were behaving a certain way. And when you read it, you will get that, yeah, I do that, right, I can see why I do that now I can change my behavior. Excuse me. It's a really excellent book for picking up why you behave certain ways in certain situations, and then afterwards you go, why did I do that? I just can't get why I did that. Read that book, it will tell you why you behaved a certain way, and in the future you can see that coming and start to think about, right, okay, I'm going to stop doing that because I know why I'm doing that. So he talks about the chimp, which is the instinctual brain, which is your reactionary, aggressive type brain, and also the brain that immediately fires whenever you're presented with a situation that is uncertain. And then you talk about your human brain, which is the brain you're normally in, the logical type brain, which makes logical decisions. And then you have the computer, which is your, I suppose, subconscious, and it fires automatically without you thinking about it. So a really interesting book to read. There's lots of different things you can pick up from it to change your mindset and change your behavior, not just with nutrition, but overall in your life, so that you can actually lead a better life and not do some of those, I wish I hadn't done those moments. Very good read. Absolutely brilliant. I would definitely recommend that. And the last book that I would look at is another really good, well-renowned book, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Atomic Habits is I base a good amount of the habit building stuff that I do with clients on that. Now, all these books, they talk about things that are already known in research and scientific data. So they're bringing together collections of ideas. And as an evidence-based nutritionist and lifestyle coach, I bring those ideas in with my own ideas and other research I've read. So you might find across a lot of these books and other books you might read on habit building and on brain chemistry and stuff like that, that there's a lot of similar things. It's because the research has been pulled in for those books. So you might find, I read that in another book and that sounds like that book. Generally, a lot of these things in here are not unique things for these people. They've just pulled in other things from everywhere else, because these discussions have been going on for a long time, and the research is, sometimes 20, 30, 40 years old, but it's still relevant to this day, because human behavior doesn't really change across the centuries. But Atomic Habits does pull a new idea about thinking about the ways to build habits and stack habits and make sure you can build strong habits. And it's well worth subscribing to James Clear's Instagram, because every day he posts a different sort of little philosophy, I suppose, about habits, which will give you, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then you can think, yeah, that's why I do things, that's how I can make things stronger, that's how I can start building a new habit. Certainly I read a lot of books on habit building because it's part of my coaching style that I use with clients, and James Clear's stuff is stuff I come back to a lot to refresh my mind. But it will help you if you're thinking about, I wish I wasn't smoking, or I wish I wasn't eating as soon as I come home, I wish I wasn't doing this, I wish I wasn't doing that, I wish I would be doing this, how can I start to do this type of thing. this book will give you a clear insight into how to do that. It's very, very good from a basic level to identify things you want to change and then how to move yourself towards that change. Now, when I talk about things about shifting the 1% and right, we need to do this little thing to start you on the direction. Again, that's a habit building thing, and this book and a lot of the other habit books talk about it. It's shifting that 1 degree, not trying to do things radically, because that never works, because you've got to change your behavior. You've got to change things ever so much by this 1%, and the more 1% you do, it's like putting a plane off course by the 1 degree. Here it's just nothing, but when you get over here, there's a massive change. And that's when I talk about my habit building. A lot of stuff comes from the Atomic Habits. It's based on the theories and what's talked about in there, and other habit stacking books and habit building books. But that is a very good read. I absolutely recommend that. That's on Audible. The only one that isn't on Audible is The Hungry Brain by Stefan Guyenet. I think there is an audio version, but it's not very good. It certainly isn't on Audible, not at the time of filming this video anyway. But the other 3 are, and they can be easily listened to in the bath, or when you're doing a walk, or when you're in the car. I listen to a lot of stuff in the car because I do a lot of driving. Well worth getting those 4 books, because we've got 4 weeks of lockdown coming up. You could read a chapter a day. That's one of my things to do, is read a chapter of a book a day in order to further my education and remind myself about certain things. And it's something certainly you can get sort of half an hour to 45 minutes of time that you would have maybe spent on Facebook just surfing away, engorging in yourself in negative content and negative influences. Instead, go and read a book for a chapter a day and learn something about your behavior, learn how to change your behavior and have a positive mindset. So I hope that was helpful, giving you some ideas for lockdown, some different stuff to read and get your teeth into. You might have already read these books, and maybe a couple of years ago, oh yeah, that was a good book, I'll go back and read that. Certainly on my Audible stuff, I go through my library every now and again and go, oh yeah, that's a good book, I'll listen to that again. And it's worth, just reading a book once is not going to help you change your behavior massively. Reading it 2 or 3 or 4 times, you start to pick up things you didn't see the first time. Like watching The Sopranos. Sometimes if you watch The Sopranos 2 or 3 times, you pick up little jokes and stuff which you didn't see before. It's exactly the same when you're reading a book which is so rich in data and rich in beneficial theories. And the more times you listen to them or read them, you will get more out of it. So I hope that's helped. Any questions, comments below. I'll put into the comments here the links to Amazon to go and buy them. If I'm allowed to do that. I don't know if you're allowed to do that on YouTube, but certainly on my website I will put them on there as well. So have a great weekend. I'm filming this on a Saturday. If you're watching this on a Saturday, have a great weekend, and I hope you're doing okay in lockdown. Shoot me a message if you need some guidance on maybe habit building or lifestyle change or anything. I've got a ton of videos I can refer you to help you with that. I'm here to help. If you need my help, please let me know. And have a great evening, whatever you're doing. Thanks.